Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. In this segment, we're going to be speaking with Mr. Sean O'Connor. He's joining us here from DexCare to talk about the importance of streamlining provider operations post-pandemic and the value of building tech with scalability. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Sean O'Connor. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Neil. It's a pleasure.
Give us a bit of your professional background and talk about your role at DexCare.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the healthcare space, Neil, since I transitioned from the military in the early 2000s. When I transitioned from the Navy into healthcare, I got into healthcare technology, specifically focused on bringing disruptive technologies into the healthcare space. So one of the first companies I got on board with early days and early mid 2000s was a company called Intuitive Surgical. They were the first FDA-approved surgical robotics company in the marketplace, and spent a decade at Intuitive, holding pretty much every commercial job you can imagine up until about 2015, and then left Intuitive to get back into the startup world, again, focused on another disruptive technology. It was an AI company that was spun at the University of Washington through a couple co-founders that I got to know through my time at Intuitive. And the company was focused on deconstructing surgical video and then correlating surgical technique or lack thereof to cost and outcomes for the healthcare system. And we were very successful in that company. We wound up selling that company to Johnson & Johnson after about 3 years of that company being in the marketplace. But it was through that endeavor that we got to know the Providence team pretty well, particularly some of the Providence Ventures team who formed and backed DexCare. So after selling that company to Johnson & Johnson, both my co-founder and I from CSAS, was the name of that company, left to form DexCare. So we joined Providence's digital innovation group pre-pandemic, right around the time the pandemic was actually getting ready to pop off in March of 2020, as executive in residence to focus on the DexCare technology stack that Providence has been building internally since 2016, and we'll talk about that here today. And spent about a year within Providence building out that tech stack, most importantly getting our financing done, and then we formally spun DexCare out of Providence Incubator in March of this year.
What solutions does DexCare offer?
Yeah, so Providence has a little bit of a unique model. They're one of the larger not-for-profit healthcare systems in the country, and they actually have about a 200-person engineering team that does all things digital for Providence. So they'll either buy third-party digital technologies and deploy them across Providence, or if they see a gap in the marketplace where one of the existing solutions isn't meeting Providence's needs, they'll use that 200 roughly person digital innovation team to build the tech stack out to service some of Providence's core digital mission needs. And then they'll use their venture fund to incubate the company and spin it out of Providence's incubator. So DexCare is the third company that has spun out of that model. And in 2016, when they started building the technology stack, they had a very fragmented consumer digital experience. They had this thing for chat, this thing for telehealth, this thing for online scheduling. They had a bunch of kind of point-based solutions that were very siloed and made it really cumbersome for consumers to access healthcare, figure out what's the right venue they need to go to, figure out what's the right modality for their visit. So the goal from building this out was to have one platform that made access to healthcare easy for consumers. It was multimodal, so it could do chat, video, in-clinic bookings, or at-home care, and multi-venue, so it could do retail, urgent, primary, specialty care, all fully integrated into the EMR with a data engine wrapped around it to make the experience more optimal for both the consumer and the provider network. So DexCare is heavily focused on making access to care easier for consumers, navigating them to the right modality and right venue for consumer preference and healthcare system roles. And then on the back end, optimizing the healthcare system provider network and brick and mortar to make sure that they load balance and optimize capacity and spread across their network.
Now, obviously, AI plays a huge role in bringing all of those, micro point items into one platform, combining all of those different aspects of accessing healthcare data.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And yeah, AI in healthcare is becoming more and more prevalent every day. So we're heavily focused on deploying some of our AI technologies on just making the consumer to provider match more efficient and more cost-effective for the healthcare system, and trying to optimize the experience for the consumer. So, in terms of what that looks like, when a consumer comes in, we learn quite a bit about them through the registration and booking flow. We understand what their intent motivation for what they're searching for at Google. We understand whether they're a new or existing customer through our EMR record match or crate, and then we understand symptoms and whether they've been here before for the same condition. So we're taking all that data And then we have all the data from our integration into the EMR system on the providers and the clinic availability. And then we're using all of that data to make the best match from a consumer to provider perspective. So when a consumer comes in, we don't want to show them a find a doctor page that has 72 different doctors and they're not sure which is the right one for them based on their conditions and their needs. We're taking the conditions and needs that we see from their intent to transact and book an appointment and what they're looking for, and then all the rich data we have on the providers that are available to treat that. If Neil comes in for a cardiology visit and there's 17 providers that could treat this condition, but Dr. Smith has the highest MTS score to treat this particular disease state, has the most efficacious time of visit and the best cost of visit, we're just going to match you to Dr. Smith and make that provider-consumer match super efficient for the consumer and then optimizing for the healthcare system. So that's what we're really using our data engine around, is looking at how do we make that experience more intelligent, less cumbersome for the consumer, but then also optimizing it for the healthcare system so they get the best and most efficient provider to treat that particular disease state.
But how does it translate into, I guess, some of the new challenges and opportunities that this pandemic has presented to DexCare?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a number of ways, I think the pandemic has definitely forced healthcare systems to become more digital quicker, and like much, much quicker. So obviously no one anticipated what was going to happen when COVID hit in 2020. Pre-COVID, some healthcare systems were getting into digital. They're doing some virtual visits. They're starting to do some chat-based care and trying to do more kind of digital bookings. But COVID definitely put pressure on everyone to figure it out really overnight. I mean, that clinic shut down and there were no other options but to do things digitally, book digitally, service visits digitally. So through that ecosystem, it was a very reactive environment. There's a lot of decisions made to bring in point solutions that could help kind of take the pressure off of some of the new challenges COVID was bringing to market. And as we see these systems emerging now, systems are trying to think more holistically around how do we have one platform that can tie all these different modalities together. And now we have one platform that ties all the different modalities together. How do we get more efficient in making our most precious resources from a healthcare system perspective, which is our providers, more efficient and safer? And that's really what we're trying to focus on doing now. When we have limited resources from a provider network standpoint, it's really about how do we make them more efficient and more effective in treating the consumers that are coming in, and trying to help systems do things now like reduce provider turnover, reduce provider tool fatigue, reduce provider burnout, by just making the digital experience a little more optimal, both from the consumer perspective and from the provider perspective, by helping them balance their schedules and balance the way they treat consumers a little bit more intelligently.
Give us any patient trends or provider trends that we should kind of keep top of mind for this coming year, 2022.
Yeah, I think on the patient side, we're seeing a shift to them expecting healthcare to behave in ways that just about all the other things in their lives are, from entertainment to travel, and that being they just want better digital experiences. They want to be able to access care a little bit easier. They want more price transparency on how they access care, and they want more value for what they get from a healthcare experience. And I think the pandemic has shifted the needle more to healthcare thinking, more consumer centric, and offering more consumer facing tools in ways that they just really didn't have to in previous ways. And then that combined with the fact that non-traditional healthcare entities are starting to play in the healthcare space, Amazon Care and some of these other disruptive third-party technologies, is forcing healthcare systems to be more digitally savvy because consumers are expecting that on the front end. On the back end, on the provider side, I think we're going to continue to see systems invest in digital tools that help provide better consumer experiences on the front end, but also make sure that they are finding ways to, as I mentioned in the last question you asked, we're hearing a lot of healthcare systems out are super worried about provider burnout and provider fatigue. The providers have been through the frontline responders have been through a crazy time really over the last year and a half. Everyone's been stretched to the gills on COVID response and having to do more with less, as that environment just puts so much pressure on healthcare. That as this emerges, healthcare systems and the executive leadership of these systems are being very thoughtful around how do we make our lives easier and better for our providers, our nurses, our staff, our frontline workers, and better digital tools that can make that capacity optimization a little bit easier, but also alleviate some of the workload on the providers on the front end, so they're just focused on clinical care and they're not having to worry about all the registration process, all the booking flows, like technologies that can take some of that off their stack so they can just be more efficient and less overburdened. But process and paperwork is going to be a big one, I think, as this continues to emerge into whatever the new world with COVID post-surge becomes.
Well, if you would give us a website where we can learn more about DexCare.
Yeah, our website is dexcarehealth.com. It's www.dexcare, health.com. And feel free to go to that website. All of our information on our core technology stack is there, and some of the exciting work we're doing with some of the largest healthcare systems in the country can be found there as well.
Well, Sean, I appreciate you joining us here on the program. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Have a great holiday season.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Mr. Sean O'Connor, co-founder and chief commercialization officer of DexCare. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.